Rain lashed against the windows. Wind howled like a banshee, rattling the old Victorian house. Inside, Rachel sat huddled on the sofa, a book trembling in her hands. She tried to focus on the words, but a creeping unease gnawed at her. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind that shook the windows, sent shivers down her spine. Rachel... It was just the storm, just the old house settling. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the sensation of eyes boring into her back. Her gaze darted to the darkened corners of the room, searching for the source of her fear. She chided herself for her paranoia. There was nothing there. It was just her imagination running wild on a stormy night. The power flickered, plunging the room into darkness. Rachel gasped, her heart pounding in her chest. She fumbled for her phone, the cold metal a comfort in her hand. The dim light from the screen did little to pierce the oppressive blackness that had swallowed the room. Rachel, come on, it's just a power outage, just a power outage. The shadows seemed to writhe and twist, taking on sinister shapes in the periphery of her vision. A low, scratching sound came from the door, like claws scraping against wood. Rachel froze, her breath catching in her throat. She strained to listen, but the sound was gone. Rachel, it's probably just a branch. Just a branch. But deep down, a primal fear began to stir. The scratching came again, more insistent this time. It was followed by a soft thud, like something heavy being dragged across the floor above her. Rachel's blood ran cold. She was no longer alone in the house. Rachel... Oh, no, no. Slowly, she rose from the sofa, her phone clutched tight in her hand. She crept towards the foot of the stairs, her ears straining for any sound. That was when she heard it. The distinct sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from the floor above. Fear, raw and consuming, washed over her. Her hand trembled as she raised her phone, the feeble light doing little to penetrate the darkness that lay ahead. Shadowy figure... Softly. Rachel! The voice, barely a whisper, sent a jolt of terror through her. She wasn't imagining it. She wasn't alone. Each step creaked ominously, the sound echoing in the silence. The air grew heavy, thick with an unseen presence. It pressed down on her, suffocating her, filling her with a terror she had never known. S1. Taking a shaky breath, Rachel began to climb the stairs. The footsteps stopped as she reached the top of the stairs. The darkness seemed to pulse around her, a living, breathing entity. She could feel its cold, malevolent gaze fixed upon her, stripping away her courage, her sanity. S1, breathing heavily. A low growl, guttural and menacing, emanated from the shadows at the end of the hallway. Rachel's grip tightened on the phone, her knuckles white as bone. She was paralyzed with fear, unable to move, unable to scream. S2, low growl. Rachel stumbled back, a scream dying in her throat. The phone slipped from her grasp, the screen shattering as it clattered to the floor. Darkness enveloped her, absolute and suffocating. She could feel its icy fingers closing around her throat, squeezing the air from her lungs. The last thing she saw before the darkness consumed her were those glowing eyes filled with an ancient, unspeakable horror. S1, gasping. Narrator. Then it emerged from the darkness, a towering figure shrouded in shadows, its eyes two glowing embers in the black. It moved towards her, gliding effortlessly, its form shifting and swirling like smoke. Rachel woke with a gasp, her body bathed in sweat. A blinding white light pierced through her eyelids. Disoriented, she looked around. She was lying in a hospital bed, tubes and wires snaking around her. S1, gasping.
It's all right, dear. You're safe now. You're in the hospital.
Rachel could only stare, her mind struggling to reconcile the sterile white room with the horrors she had witnessed. It had felt so real. The darkness, the glowing eyes, the suffocating terror. It couldn't have been a dream. As the nurse checked her vitals, Rachel noticed something strange. There were deep, angry scratches on her arms, scratches that looked like claws. A chill ran down her spine. The horror, she realized with a shudder, had been all too real.